Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into the velvet-draped, marble-pillared, suspiciously perfumed world of ancient Rome's rich and famous. Forget gladiators, forget chariots, forget that one weird neighbor who calls his dog Caesar. Tonight, we're looking at what life was actually like if you somehow hit the Roman jackpot. Because as it turns out, being rich in ancient Rome wasn't all orgies and grapes. Sometimes it was more stressful than your group chat after a surprise high school reunion. Before we dive waist-deep into togas, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this sort of thing. Leave a comment telling me which city you're listening from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're currently in the bath, because trust me, Romans would absolutely approve. Now, dim those lights, put a fan on for the ancient aqueduct experience, and settle into whatever passes for a triclinium in your house. Maybe fluff a pillow, or tuck in a plastic fern as a nod to ancient decor. Let's get you relaxed, because things are about to get weird. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to be rich in Rome? Was the wine really that good, or did it taste like foot? Could you go a day without bumping into your own cousin who just wants to borrow some gold? What happened when your bathwater wasn't hot enough and your 14 servants had to panic? How many times can you pretend to enjoy roasted dormouse before someone calls your bluff? And was the worst thing about being rich the constant risk of assassination? Or was it the toga rashes? Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Rome. You're loaded, you're in debt, your sandals are pinching, and your dinner party is already 3 hours late. Good luck. You wake to the soft sound of your personal slave, gently whispering "Surge, Domin," which means "get up, boss," while opening the shutters to let in approximately 1 million decibels of Mediterranean sunshine. Your mattress is stuffed with imported feathers, but your back still hurts from all the banquets. You're rich, but you're also already exhausted. The first thing you notice, other than the blinding light that instantly erases any hope of a gentle morning, is that you're not alone. No, you have a carefully orchestrated chorus of slaves, servants, and distant cousins tiptoeing around your bed like you're some kind of living statue, one that snores. The chamber is big enough to house a small village, echoing with the sounds of sandals on mosaic floors and someone discreetly coughing because the air still smells faintly of last night's incense, spilled wine, and the unmistakable perfume of money. Your eyelids flutter as a slave approaches with a silver bowl and pours lukewarm rosewater over your hands. It's meant to be refreshing. Mostly, it just makes you wonder if rosewater does anything except make your fingers smell like a slightly anxious wedding. You pretend to enjoy it, because a rich Roman's day is a performance from the very first minute. Even your yawning must seem dignified. This, you realize, is the curse of being rich in ancient Rome. You're expected to look effortlessly majestic at all times, even when you're drooling on a pillow stuffed with peacock feathers. Your bed, by the way, is less a bed and more an ancient orthopedic experiment. Romans love luxury, but they also love excess. So what should be a comfortable sleep turns into a complicated nest of silk sheets, imported blankets, and an architectural marvel of pillows, none of which actually support your spine. Ever tried to sleep on 10 pillows stacked in a way that guarantees you'll wake up with a neck shaped like a question mark? Congratulations, you're basically an honorary Roman senator now. You try to stretch, but your toga, yes, you fell asleep in your toga again. A rookie mistake, wraps itself around your legs like a judgmental python. At least it's made of fine Egyptian linen, dyed a colour so expensive that only 3 people in the empire can pronounce it. As you wiggle free, a servant quietly slides sandals onto your feet. You have not successfully put on your own shoes since you were 8. This is not out of laziness, but because the social ladder in Rome is so tall that every rung is just another chance to fall off in front of an audience. The shutters are thrown wide. Sun pours into the room, lighting up your collection of marble busts and expensive bad decisions. Outside, the city hums, vendors shouting in the forum, street performers tuning lyres, and at least one neighbor loudly complaining about his bathwater being 2 degrees too cold. You have a view of the whole city, tiled roofs, columns, maybe even the circus in the distance. But you also have a view of the never-ending line of clients already gathering at your front door, all hoping to be the first to beg you for money, favors, or advice on how to look less desperate. You consider hitting snooze, but in ancient Rome, snooze is not an option. Your personal assistant, yes, even ancient Romans needed one, hands you a list of today's appointments, a visit to the bathhouse, a quick detour to the Senate, a business brunch with someone you secretly hope forgets your name, and, of course, your mother's daily complaint about how you never call. Your first real thought of the day? Maybe just once, you'd like to wake up without an audience. Or maybe invent a pillow that doesn't feel like a sack of luxury gravel. But alas, you're rich in Rome, and privacy is a fantasy reserved for peasants. Here, even your dreams have witnesses. You sigh, adjust your toga, and prepare to face another day as Rome's wealthiest, most sleep-deprived human alarm clock. After all, when your entire life is public, the only thing you truly own is that brief, blurry moment between waking and being awake. And even that, in Rome, is up for debate. Breakfast is a formal affair. You nibble bread dipped in honey while watching your neighbor, Gaius, send smoke signals with his more expensive incense. The real meal? Quietly panicking that your honey isn't imported enough. You sit in your atrium, sunlight filtering through the open ceiling, birds chirping somewhere suspiciously close to the olive jars, and you're surrounded by the finest tableware Roman money can buy. Everything gleams. Silver plates, gold-trimmed cups, glassware so thin it's basically a financial panic attack waiting to happen. But the centerpiece, the item that determines whether today is a triumph or a tragedy, is that little clay pot of honey. It looks innocent, but beneath the surface it's a culinary landmine. See, in ancient Rome, honey isn't just honey. It's a status symbol, a conversation piece, a measure of your self-worth. Is your honey from Spain, or is it the cheap stuff from the Apennines? Can you taste the wildflowers, or does it have a hint of "I got this at the market and pretended it was rare, the stakes are high"? Last week, Gaius boasted about his Gallic honey, collected by bees who, he claims, only pollinate flowers grown on the tears of exiled poets. You try to keep up, but deep down you know your honey is one step above sticky mystery. Your slaves hover, offering everything from dried figs to hard-boiled quail eggs, but you can barely enjoy any of it. You're too busy eavesdropping through the marble walls as your neighbor's kitchen erupts in laughter. No doubt, because Gaius has found a new, slightly more golden honey to show off. Breakfast for the rich isn't about filling your stomach. It's about filling the emotional void left by a lifetime of competitive snacking. And let's talk bread. Roman bread comes in all shapes and sizes, but this morning you're staring down a dense, slightly burnt loaf shaped vaguely like an ancient brick. You break off a piece with as much elegance as you can muster, trying not to reveal that yesterday's bread is today's breakfast, again. Of course, your slaves have done their best to warm it over the coals. But let's face it, no amount of toasting can hide the existential staleness of a third-day loaf. You dip the bread in honey and try to look relaxed, but your mind is racing. What if the honey's gone grainy? What if it's too runny? You look across at your neighbor's table and spot a small mound of honeycomb. A flex. Pure and simple. You make a mental note to send your steward to the market later with very clear instructions. Get the good stuff. Or find a new employer. Between bites, you engage in the ancient Roman pastime of casual self-sabotage, comparing yourself to everyone around you. You scan your table. Are there enough dates? Should you have splurged on Egyptian pomegranates? Is your cheese sufficiently stinky? Someone once told you a breakfast spread was a reflection of the soul, and now you're convinced your soul is slightly undercooked. All this is before you've even touched the wine. Yes, morning wine. Not because you need it, but because not serving it is a social crime. You force down a sip of watery red, hoping it doesn't clash with the honey and bread. Meanwhile, Your cousin, who invited himself over, loudly wonders if your olives are last season. You consider sending him to Carthage. As you smile through gritted teeth, you realize breakfast in Rome is less about nutrition and more about anxiety, performance, and low-key humiliation. You barely notice the taste of anything, so busy are you keeping up appearances. If only they knew how much you secretly crave a quiet bowl of gruel and the freedom to eat it without an audience. In the end, you push back from the table, not satisfied but sufficiently panicked to fuel your social maneuvering for another day. You survived another round of the bread and honey crisis. Tomorrow, you vow, you'll have better honey, even if you have to bribe a beekeeper yourself. Welcome to breakfast in ancient Rome. Competitive, exhausting, and, somehow, always a little bit sticky. Your every whim is attended by slaves, so many that you forget half their names. The awkward part? You can't even put on your own sandals without someone judging your toes. You'd think being surrounded by an army of people whose entire job is to make your life easier would be relaxing. But in reality, it's a marathon of awkwardness, social tension, and the kind of guilt that makes you wake up at 3 a.m., questioning your life choices. At any given moment, there's at least one person within arm's reach waiting to plump your cushions, refill your cup, or help you remember where you left your dignity last night. Forget having a private moment. In ancient Rome, privacy is like a luxury import from the East, rare, expensive, and never quite what you imagined. Take your morning routine. A slave appears with a jug of perfumed oil for your skin. Another one offers a razor. Good luck. They all sharpen it differently, and you're never sure if this is the day your beard and your ear part ways. There's someone else holding up a fresh tunic, waiting to help you into it, because apparently dressing yourself is so last republic. The real challenge is remembering everyone's specialty. Is Lucius the bath attendant, or is that Tiro? You're honestly not sure, and at this point it's easier to just say you there and hope for the best. Then there are the sandals. The Romans may have invented central heating and indoor plumbing, but sandal technology still hasn't solved the eternal problem of straps. You're stuck, foot poised mid-air, as a slave delicately slips on your footwear, all the while giving you a silent performance review of your calluses. Toes are a big deal in Rome, which is unfortunate if you've spent your childhood barefoot on volcanic rock. You try not to take it personally, but every flinch and raised eyebrow reminds you that, for all your wealth, you're still judged for your questionable grooming habits. The awkwardness doesn't end there. Moving through your villa is like being the star of your own reality show, except nobody ever leaves the set. Want a glass of water? Someone is already there, ready to hand you one with a bow so deep you worry for their spine. Want to sit down? The chair has been pre-warmed, fluffed, and checked for wayward scorpions. You feel less like a person and more like an unusually needy houseplant. Sometimes you catch snippets of conversation as your slaves gossip in low Latin. Are they talking about you? About the other wealthy family down the street? About the time you nearly tripped on your own toga? You'll never know. But paranoia is included at no extra charge with every household staff. Hosting a dinner party is a logistical nightmare. You have slaves for food prep, slaves for serving, slaves just for pouring wine, and one guy whose whole job seems to be stand by the door and look important. If the meal is good, guests praise your taste. If it's bad, everyone blames the kitchen slaves who are already nervously eyeing the leftovers and muttering about the good old days before you decided to experiment with flamingo tongues. You nod along, pretending you're above it all, but you can't shake the feeling you're the least qualified person in your own house. It gets even stranger with personal matters. There's a slave assigned to remind you about your mother's birthday, another to deliver secret love notes to your latest crush, and a scribe who keeps track of your debts. There's a whole category of slaves for jobs you didn't even know existed. When your bathwater is too cold, 3 people spring into action. When your toga is stained, someone silently whisks it away, possibly judging your table manners. It's like living in a 5-star hotel where the staff is always present, always watching, and occasionally more organized than you are. For every moment of comfort, there's a moment of social landmine. Forget to greet someone by name, and you risk a sullen silence in the atrium for days. Ask the wrong person to fetch your sandals, and you might accidentally trigger an internal household rivalry that lasts until the Saturnalia festival. You wonder if this is what absolute power feels like. Surrounded, pampered, and perpetually one clumsy request away from total household collapse. At the end of the day, you're left with a curious blend of comfort, embarrassment, and existential dread. You have people for everything, literally everything, but sometimes you'd give anything to put on your own sandals in peace, free from the judgment of 1,000 silent eyes. Welcome to Roman luxury. Just because you don't have to lift a finger doesn't mean you'll ever feel comfortable doing nothing at all. Every morning you battle 3 servants and several yards of linen, trying to look dignified. The result is always the same. You're wrapped like a sad burrito, sweating and late for your own day. Let's be honest. No matter how many history documentaries you've watched, nothing can prepare you for the ancient Roman toga. This is not a simple sheet. It's an aggressive, many-layered monstrosity of wool, tailored for one purpose only, to remind you every single day that fashion is pain. Your toga isn't just clothing, it's a status symbol, a declaration of your rank, and, more often than not, a trap designed by someone with a grudge against circulation. You don't just throw it on and go, oh no, the toga tango is a team sport. First, a slave hands you your undertunic, already starched into something just shy of medieval sandpaper. You step in, and it immediately rides up in all the wrong places. Next comes the main event, the toga itself. For the average rich Roman, this is at least 15 feet of heavy, itchy wool, dyed a subtle off-white if you're a regular citizen, or maybe a blinding, purple-edged nightmare if you're unlucky enough to be a senator. Purple dye, by the way, comes from crushed sea snails. It smells as bad as it sounds, and you'll spend the day fighting off every hungry cat in the neighborhood. The servants start wrapping, folding, and artfully draping the fabric across your chest, over your shoulder, under your arm, around your waist, and then back up again for good measure. The correct arrangement, according to Roman etiquette, is somewhere between graceful marble statue and pastor that's lost the will to live. One wrong fold, and you've accidentally signaled that you're in mourning, running for office, or simply bad at togas. None of these are good options before breakfast. It's summer, of course, and you're already sweating like a gladiator at tax time. The toga, famous for trapping body heat, is basically an ancient wearable sauna. You dream of shedding a few layers, but togas must be worn in public, even if it's 35 degrees in the shade and the only breeze is coming from your own desperate sighs. You catch sight of yourself in a polished bronze mirror and marvel at how someone so rich can look so disheveled. A single lock of hair is out of place, and you know, absolutely know, someone will notice. But you're not done yet. The Roman toga comes with rules. You can't pin it with a brooch, unless you want to get side-eyed by the Senate, and you can't belt it with anything as practical as a modern sash. Instead, you rely on careful tucking, gravity, and sheer personal shame to keep the whole thing from collapsing mid-speech. The more important you are, the heavier and fussier the fabric, as if the toga itself is testing your commitment to public service. It's a wearable metaphor for Roman bureaucracy. You stagger out the door, tripping only once over the hem. In the street, every other rich Roman is having the same problem. Walking very slowly, one arm immobilized by excess wool, all pretending not to be absolutely boiling. You pass a group of young men with their togas perfectly arranged, smug in the knowledge that they only had to stand still while their mothers did all the work. You, on the other hand, are an adult with a calendar to keep and several feet of fabric slowly strangling your ambition. By midday, you've developed a rash from a combination of sweat, friction, and existential dread. The toga absorbs it all and then gives it back in the form of a peculiar aroma that follows you for hours. You consider inventing the tunic and pants combo, but you know society isn't ready for that kind of revolution. Back home, you peel off your toga like an ancient overcooked lasagna noodle and collapse onto a couch, vowing that tomorrow you'll master the art of dignified drapery. Spoiler, you won't. For now, you settle for a fresh tunic, a cold drink, and the knowledge that in Rome, style comes with a generous helping of suffering and an audience to watch you sweat through every minute of it. The Roman bath isn't just a spa, it's a social war zone. You soak in water hotter than your last takeout curry, desperately trying to look unbothered while rivals gossip behind fans. The marble is cold, the rumours are hot, and you're already regretting that extra honey at breakfast. The bathhouse is the epicenter of Roman elite life. Every tile echoes with ambition, alliances, and more than a little backstabbing, sometimes figurative, sometimes not. It starts innocently enough. You arrive with your slave in tow who's hauling towels, oils, and enough grooming tools to detail a chariot. The building itself is enormous, all domed ceilings and clouds of fragrant steam, with mosaics on the floor depicting happy dolphins who've clearly never had to discuss real estate taxes. You try to keep your head high as you shed your toga, good riddance, and slip into a simple linen wrap. Then, it's a circuit of rooms hotter and steamier than a soap opera set. First, the appetiterium, the changing room, where you attempt small talk while someone very pointedly accidentally steps on your sandal. Next, the tepidarium, the warm room, where you start sweating out not just last night's wine, but your deepest anxieties about whether you remembered to pay the street musicians outside your villa. The caldarium is where things get serious. This is the hot room. The water is so blistering you wonder if the guy next to you is boiling an egg, or just practicing for the afterlife. Here, the real drama begins. Conversation rises with the steam. Two senators are loudly debating aqueduct budgets. But you know they're really arguing about who gets to host the next gladiator games. Meanwhile, a group of wealthy matrons whisper behind silk fans, dissecting who wore the wrong shoes to the Saturnalia feast and who's been seen spending a suspicious amount of time with their brother-in-law's best friend. You do your best to act casual. Your strategy: stare at the painted ceiling, avoid eye contact, and hope nobody brings up your wife's third cousin's business scandal. But it never works. Someone always floats by with a nonchalant, "Did you hear?" Or, "Is it true about your new mosaic?" The subtext is clear. You are always one rumour away from becoming the bathhouse headline. If you think you can escape by moving to the frigidarium, the cold room, you're out of luck. The cold plunge pool is basically a shock therapy session for both your body and your reputation. You're shivering, but at least no one can see you sweat as a local real estate developer brags loudly about his new villa. You nod, smile, and silently pray the water freezes your fake smile into place. Of course, there's the matter of body care. A team of slaves appears with olive oil and strigils, those curved metal scrapers meant to exfoliate and humiliate in equal measure. You try not to flinch as a slave enthusiastically scrapes yesterday's regrets off your shoulders, all while eavesdropping on a nearby conversation about the governor's mysterious illness and whether anyone has seen his prize peacock lately. And let's not forget the inevitable performance of physical prowess. There's always a guy doing laps, flexing for anyone who will watch, while you try to hide the fact you've pulled a muscle sitting down too quickly. It's not enough to be clean in Rome. You must also look robust, refreshed, and ready to take on another day of social maneuvering. As you finally towel off and gather your dignity and your gossip, you're already strategizing how to avoid being the main topic of conversation tomorrow. You leave the bathhouse relaxed in body, tense in spirit, and, if you're lucky, only slightly sunburned from that one marble bench that's always hotter than the surface of Mercury. The bathhouse in ancient Rome: come for the cleanliness, stay for the intrigue, leave with cleaner skin and a head full of stories you're not supposed to know. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember to bring better honey next time. Every morning, a crowd of clients shows up to your door, hoping for free food, coins, or a favor. It's like being a celebrity, but all your fans expect you to hire their cousin immediately. In ancient Rome, if you're wealthy, your front entrance is less a peaceful threshold and more a revolving door for hopefuls, flatterers, and opportunists. This is the salutatio, the client parade. It's not a party, but you still have to dress for it. You prepare for the onslaught by gulping your breakfast wine and reminding yourself that generosity is the rent you pay for the privilege of being everyone's favorite meal ticket. The sun barely rises, and already your atrium is buzzing. There's a line snaking out into the street. Local shopkeepers, freedmen, failed poets, distant relatives, and at least one guy you're convinced is just here for the snacks. Everyone is ready with a compliment or a sob story. Some clients even bring their own children to up the pity factor. The little ones clutch your tunic, stare up with wide eyes, and ask for a job at the stables. You give them a coin and try not to imagine what their parents are whispering about you on the way home. Here's the deal. Rome runs on patronage, and you, dear listener, are a patronus. That means you're responsible for handing out favors, job recommendations, and the occasional basket of bread and cheese. In return, your clients are supposed to sing your praises, vote for you if you're running for office, or just make you look important by swelling the ranks of your daily entourage. It's a symbiotic relationship, like those birds that pick bugs off hippos, only with more sandals and less gratitude. The ritual is always the same. Your clients greet you with exaggerated bows and endless flattery. Oh, how noble! How wise! Your garden statue of Minerva is even more beautiful than yesterday. You smile graciously and try not to laugh at the same recycled compliments you've heard since the days of Julius Caesar's worst haircut. If you're lucky, today's compliments won't be about your nose. Once everyone's assembled, it's time for the sportula, the official handout. You walk through your entryway, dispensing coins, bread, or sometimes leftovers from last night's dinner. Some clients are shameless, asking for wine, chickens, or introductions to your very eligible daughter. One fellow makes the rounds every week with a new injury, always carefully bandaged, always right before the handouts. You suspect he moonlights as an actor. You keep score in your head. Who's loyal, who's useful, who's just here for the figs? The problem is, nobody ever leaves your client list. The line never gets shorter, and every favor you hand out is remembered in detail, ready to be called in when you least expect it. Forget someone's name? Miss a birthday? There's a rumor in the market before lunchtime that you're cold, distant, possibly barbarian. All because you didn't greet Gaius the cheese vendor with enough enthusiasm. And just when you think it's over, there's always a final surprise. A particularly ambitious client corners you on your doorstep. He wants a letter of introduction, a new job, and perhaps just a small loan, strictly temporary, until his ship comes in from Alexandria. You nod, make vague promises, and resolve to leave by the side entrance tomorrow. By the time the salutatio is finished, you're mentally exhausted. You haven't even started your real work for the day, but you've already given away half your pantry and most of your patience. You wonder if other rich people have found a secret to reducing the parade, or if this is just the Roman way, paying people to like you, one handout at a time. In the end, you retreat to your inner courtyard, surrounded by statues, fountains, and the lingering echoes of, "Oh, what a noble patron." For a fleeting moment, you consider switching places with your own clients. But then you remember, at least nobody is knocking on their door at dawn, demanding free olives and a letter to the governor. Welcome to Roman popularity, the original, exhausting influencer lifestyle, where the likes are measured in bread, coins, and how fast you can smile through 1,000 requests for favors. After the clients leave, it's time for a light meal with your peers. Nobody eats, everyone lies about their latest investments. You just try not to choke on your own envy. You might imagine that, after enduring a morning parade of clients, the rest of your day can finally begin with a proper, relaxing meal among equals. Think again. This isn't brunch. This is competitive misery in the shape of a meal. You gather in your sunlit dining room, the triclinium, alongside other senators, landowners, and whatever flavor of entrepreneur is fashionable this month. The table is set with the usual silverware, cold leftovers from last night's feast, and a centerpiece that screams, "I have money but questionable taste." You try to act casual as a slave pours you a goblet of wine, this one allegedly imported from Greece, though you're pretty sure it tastes suspiciously local. Your neighbor Marcus launches into a monologue about his new olive groves near Naples. He claims the olives are twice as oily as the competition's, and that the local peasants are so grateful they pray for him daily. Across the table, Cornelia counters with a story about her husband's investment in a rare Egyptian papyrus import scheme, guaranteed to double his denarii by next harvest. You nod, swirl your wine, and quietly calculate how many villas you'd have to sell to break even with these titans of industry. The meal itself is an elaborate charade. There's a spread of eggs, cheese, nuts, bread, and honey, more than enough for a light breakfast, but nobody actually eats. Every hand hovers politely over the platter, as if the mere act of consumption would reveal weakness. Instead, the conversation revolves around whose estate has the best new mosaic, who hired the most fashionable Greek tutor, and whether the real money this year is in African marble or Sardinian sheep. You try to look interested, but you're too busy trying to remember if you're supposed to be in the olive oil business this month, or if you're still pretending to care about North African grain futures. Between polite bites of cheese and nibbles of bread, you're expected to drop hints about your own supposed successes. A casual, "Oh, I hear my new pottery workshop is already the talk of the Aventine," is met with thin smiles and veiled skepticism. Someone will ask what your return on investment is, and you'll respond with something vague about long-term gains, hoping nobody asks for numbers. In Rome, the only thing more taboo than actual poverty is admitting you aren't making a killing on every single venture. And while you're busy pretending not to care about status, envy sits like a secret ingredient in every course. You hear about Lucius's new fountain that allegedly sprays rosewater and imported peacock feathers. You smile and sip your wine, but deep down you're making a mental note to one-up him at your next banquet. The entire meal is a balancing act. Appear wealthy, but not too showy. Interested, but never desperate. Supportive, but always on the lookout for someone else's impending financial doom. On rare occasions, someone's mask slips. Maybe they hint at a bad harvest, a shipment gone missing, or a troublesome slave who keeps breaking the expensive plates. The group reacts like a flock of startled birds, nodding solemnly, expressing fake concern, then immediately plotting how to use this new gossip for personal advantage. You remember last month when Publius let slip that his cousin owed money to a moneylender. By sunset, the whole city knew, and by dawn, Publius's cousin was paying triple interest. As brunch winds down, you've managed to eat half a fig and drink a cup of wine. You're not full, but you are overflowing with anxiety and competitive dread. The plates are cleared, the guests disperse, and the only thing left is the lingering smell of envy and whatever it is that passes for artisan cheese in your social circle. You leave the table more exhausted than when you sat down, already dreading the next light meal of posturing and panic. In ancient Rome, breakfast with friends isn't about food or friendship, it's about survival, one polite lie at a time. You're summoned to the Senate, where the main activity is arguing over who gets to speak next. Most laws are decided before you arrive. You pretend to listen while plotting your next escape. The Roman Senate is supposed to be the seat of wisdom and power, the place where the fate of the Republic, or lately, the Empire, is shaped by the greatest minds of the age. In reality, it's less like a council of philosopher kings, and more like the world's oldest, most dramatic open mic night. The building is vast and echoing, full of marble columns and uncomfortable benches, the air thick with cologne, ambition, and just a hint of yesterday's garlic. You make your grand entrance, toga as straight as you can manage, hoping to project the calm dignity of a statesman who didn't just spend the last hour untangling himself from his own bedsheet. As you take your assigned seat, carefully chosen by a system so confusing even the priests have given up trying to explain it. You're greeted by a symphony of muttered Latin, theatrical sighs, and the sound of senators dropping their wax tablets in frustration. Today's agenda? Ostensibly, you're here to debate an urgent matter, maybe a new aqueduct, or whether peacocks can legally be declared a public nuisance. But let's be real. The real contest is over who gets to deliver the longest, most self-important speech. A parade of orators takes the floor, each one determined to outdo the last in rhetorical flourishes and subtle digs at their rivals. One guy opens with an epic poem, another starts quoting Socrates. Someone in the back is definitely asleep, though he's cleverly trained his slave to nudge him awake whenever his name is mentioned. You try to look engaged, occasionally nodding or scribbling on a wax tablet. It's mostly for show. Any actual decisions were made last night, at a private dinner where the wine flowed, the bribes were exchanged, and someone's pet monkey was taught to juggle bread rolls. The Senate, as you quickly learn, is more about performance than policy. Occasionally things get exciting. Two senators will argue so loudly about the finer points of grain tariffs that everyone else stops pretending to care and leans in, hoping for some real drama. There's even a rumor that last month's debate over public latrines ended with someone's wig flying into the gallery. No one knows for sure, but the story gets better with every telling. Today, unfortunately, the main excitement is whether Senator Balbus's cough is due to bad oysters or a new political scandal. Every so often, the presiding consul will call for order, which usually means banging a staff, shouting, or glaring at the rowdiest group until they pretend to be sorry. Votes are called, but by the time your name comes up, you've already forgotten what you're supposed to support. You just say yes and hope it's not another motion to increase taxes on imported cheese. Last time you accidentally approved something, you spent a week fending off angry dairy merchants. The Senate has its own unofficial rituals. There's the cloak adjustment, a synchronized movement where everyone shifts uncomfortably at the exact same time. There's the dramatic exit, where a senator storms out, only to lurk by the doorway, waiting for someone to beg him to come back. And of course, the sudden cough attack, strategically timed whenever a rival is making too much sense. As the day drags on, you find your mind wandering. You wonder if you should have invested in Egyptian papyrus after all, or maybe started that olive oil business in Spain. You imagine a life without endless debates, just peaceful mornings and maybe a small vineyard far from the madding crowd. Then you snap back to reality as the Senate bursts into applause for a particularly dull speech about drainage ditches. Finally, after hours of theatrical debate and very little actual decision-making, you are dismissed. You shuffle out, mind buzzing with gossip and regret, already bracing yourself for the next summons. In Rome, politics is less about power and more about enduring the world's longest meeting without falling asleep, or worse, accidentally voting yourself onto another important committee. You emerge into the sunlight, breathing in fresh air for the first time all day. The fate of the empire is, once again, unchanged. But you? You've survived another round in the greatest political circus history has ever known. Welcome to the Roman Senate, where the drama is real, the progress is optional, and the only thing longer than the speeches is your growing to-do list. Should you wear your gold ring or your other gold ring? Red-dyed cloak or purple-dyed cloak? If only anyone told you that purple comes from sea snails and smells like despair. In ancient Rome, being wealthy means having options. Too many options. Every morning, you face an existential crisis that would make any modern shopper weep. Which accessory best screams important and only slightly insufferable? Your jewelry box is overflowing with rings. Some with gems, some with family crests, and at least one you think you won in a bet, though you're a little foggy on the details. Since that particular night ended with a broken statue and a bill for 6 amphorae of wine. Roman law says only the elite can wear certain gold rings. But nobody mentions how much hand-wringing goes into picking the right one for breakfast. It's not just jewelry. Your wardrobe is a veritable museum of fabric, color, and questionable taste. Wealthy Romans love their dyed fabrics, and nothing says power like purple. Of course, you now know that purple dye comes from tiny sea snails, thousands of them, crushed and boiled for days on end until every garment radiates the subtle fragrance of seaside misery. Every time you put on your purple-edged toga, you wonder whether you're impressing your peers or just making everyone hungry for seafood. Standing in front of your collection, you debate, do you go with the bright red cloak that screams, "I'm ready for business," or the muted blue one that says, "I have feelings, but I'm also loaded"? You're acutely aware that whatever you choose, someone will have an opinion. Your mother will insist the red brings out your eyes, while your brother claims blue is more senatorial. Your cousin, meanwhile, just wants to borrow your new gold-embroidered sandals. Decision fatigue is a real condition in ancient Rome, but nobody's invented a support group for it yet. And it doesn't stop with clothes. Even your daily walk to the forum is a logistical puzzle. Do you take the palanquin, carried by 4 very bored-looking slaves and guaranteed to get you stared at by half the city? Or do you walk, risking dust on your expensive new footwear, but scoring points for being one with the people? Either way, someone will judge you. Romans love to judge. If you walk too quickly, you're in a hurry and therefore anxious. Too slowly, and you're lazy. If you stop to buy flowers for your wife, you're accused of either plotting an affair or forgetting her birthday. You simply can't win. Let's talk feasts. Throwing a banquet is a minefield of decisions. What to serve, who to invite, which imported delicacy will make your rivals green with envy, or, in the case of that one dodgy fish sauce, possibly green for other reasons. Should you order flamingo tongues again, or is that passé? Are giraffe steaks still in fashion, or will everyone talk behind your back about the incident at last month's dinner? You find yourself poring over recipe scrolls, trying to determine which fruit will look the most exotic while remaining edible. Even the musicians are a dilemma. Too many harps, and you look desperate for attention. Too few, and people might actually start talking to each other. Your villa, too, is a gallery of choices gone wrong. Should you replace the out-of-date mosaic in your atrium, even though it's only a year old? What about the new statue in the garden? Does it have enough abs? Or should you import an entire fountain from Greece just to keep up with the senator across the road? Each improvement brings more decisions, more anxiety, and more money spent on things you'll get bored of by Saturnalia. The truth is, being rich in Rome means being trapped in a never-ending cycle of options, upgrades, and social second-guessing. Every day is a parade of choices, each one more trivial and yet somehow more stressful than the last. By the time you leave your house, adorned, perfumed, and possibly smelling a little too much like shellfish, you're already longing for a simpler life. Maybe just one gold ring, one sensible cloak, and a tunic that smells like linen instead of the Mediterranean's greatest ecological tragedy. But for now, you make your choice. Step out the door, and pray that today, for once, nobody notices your cloak is last season's purple. Because in Rome, your biggest luxury is also your greatest burden. You have people's attention, and they never ever let you forget it. Roman doctors love leeches, wine, and occasionally magic spells. You're not sure if you feel better after a treatment or just more broke. Being rich in ancient Rome means you can afford the best healthcare money can buy. At least, that's what everyone tells you. In practice, it's a parade of questionable cures, trial and error medicine, and enough snake oil to fill the Tiber. Your personal physician, an expensive import from Greece who insists on being called doctor, is fond of diagnosing you with things that sound impressive and terminal, usually before brunch. You get a cough, he suggests bloodletting. You get a rash, he suggests more wine. You stub your toe, and suddenly it's time for an exorcism, just to be safe. Your morning begins with a quick health check. The doctor arrives with a box of tools that look more appropriate for home renovation than medicine. He asks how you slept, takes your pulse, sometimes at the wrist, sometimes just guessing, and then proposes a radical new cure involving olive oil, eagle fat, and chanting to Apollo. You wonder if it's too late to just move to the countryside and become a hermit with a pet goat. The most popular treatments always seem to involve leeches. Romans are obsessed with balancing their four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. So your doctor is constantly suggesting that you need just a little less blood. You sit stoically as a line of slimy parasites is attached to your arm, watching your precious life essence slowly fill a clay cup. If you're lucky, the leeches fall off before you faint. If you're unlucky, your doctor tells you this is a good sign. You begin to suspect he just likes leeches. Then comes the wine. Every ailment, from indigestion to existential dread, can apparently be fixed by pouring more Falernian down your throat. Got a headache? Try some wine. Aching joints? Warm wine, spiced with herbs. Emotional instability? Just wine, straight from the amphora. You start to wonder if your doctor is secretly working for the local vineyards. After your third medicinal glass of the morning, you're feeling no pain, mostly because you're having trouble remembering your own name. When wine and leeches fail to deliver a miracle, there's always the last resort: magic. Your household has at least one wise old woman, either a Greek aunt or a local witch, who swears by spells, amulets, and incense burned at precisely the wrong hour. You're handed a charm against fever, a recipe for boiled mouse, and a lecture about not angering the household gods. The lines between science, faith, and desperation blur so thoroughly you just go along with whatever keeps your relatives from panicking. If you need surgery, may the gods help you. Roman surgeons are a bold, fearless lot, wielding bronze scalpels and iron forceps, often after a nice big lunch, and absolutely no concept of sterilization. Anesthesia is just a fancy word for bite down on this stick and pray. A simple toothache can turn into a public spectacle, with your barber surgeon yanking molars in the atrium, while your household cheers him on and your personal dignity takes a holiday. Infection? They'll suggest more wine, or perhaps a poultice of goose fat and poppy seeds, depending on what's on hand. You'd think being rich would spare you from some of this, but wealth only means you get more elaborate nonsense. There's always someone selling the latest health fad, wearing amethyst beads for cleansing, rubbing yourself with imported salt, or sleeping in a room filled with cut onions to ward off bad air. Your bedroom smells like a salad, and your purse is lighter every day. And yet, for all the dubious cures, you sometimes get lucky. Maybe the fever passes, maybe the rash goes away, maybe you just build up a tolerance to whatever your doctor's latest theory is. When you do recover, everyone credits the gods, the doctor, and occasionally the household cat who was sitting nearby at the time. So you keep paying for treatments, keep enduring the leeches, and keep hoping that one day medical science will discover antibiotics and a nice, quiet walk in the garden. Until then, you're stuck with Roman healthcare, ancient wisdom, modern anxiety, and a lingering suspicion that you'd be better off with a cup of wine and a nap. Lunch is a 6-course disaster, featuring things that fly, swim, and occasionally hiss. You pretend to enjoy stuffed dormouse while mentally composing your will. As a rich Roman, you'd think lunch would be a relaxing affair, a civilized pause in the day, perhaps a little bread, a little cheese, some polite conversation. No, lunch in your world is a full-contact spectacle, a social obstacle course dressed up as fine dining. The goal is to impress, shock, and, if possible, confuse every guest at your table. It's not just a meal, it's a carefully staged event where the real main course is anxiety. The first course arrives with a flourish. Oysters, fresh from the coast, accompanied by a servant who swears none of them were dead when they left the sea. You nod and smile, but you know better. You watch that same servant drop one on the floor earlier, brush it off, and whisper, "Good enough for the senator." No one says a word about it, because in Rome, lunch is less about health and more about hierarchy. Next up, a parade of exotic birds. Lark tongues, peacock breasts, and, because your neighbour was boasting last week, an actual roast flamingo. The bird is bright pink, majestic, and tastes like expensive regret. You chew carefully, aware that flamingo is, at best, a dish for people who have run out of normal things to brag about. The person across from you nods approvingly and immediately launches into a story about the time he hosted a lunch featuring giraffe marrow. The only appropriate response is to fake a coughing fit and hope someone passes the wine. You reach for the bread, which is so encrusted with seeds and spices, it could probably be used as an emergency doorstop. There's also cheese, aged to the point of sentience, and honey imported from somewhere you can't pronounce. A slave leans over to refill your cup with wine that's more vinegar than vintage. You take a sip anyway, because it helps dull the taste of whatever comes next. Then comes the showpiece course, stuffed dormouse. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a rodent, plucked, cleaned, and if you're lucky, liberally seasoned before being baked and served on a bed of lentils. The host assures everyone it's a delicacy, but all you can think is that you're one bad decision away from eating the family cat. You force a smile, slice off a piece, and begin mentally updating your will. As the meal drags on, the conversation shifts to what you're eating, how rare it is, and whether anyone's ever tried eating owl. Someone jokes about serving snake at next week's feast. You're not sure it's a joke. Every rich Roman is trying to outdo the last, and you get the sneaking suspicion that, in a few years, someone's going to start importing penguins just to prove a point. Of course, there's seafood, lots of seafood. Garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce, is poured over nearly everything. It's the ketchup of ancient Rome, except it smells like someone left an anchovy in the sun for 3 weeks and then wrote poetry about it. The aristocrats next to you claim they can taste the difference between Spanish and North African garum. You nod along, wondering if your palate is broken or if everyone is just lying for the sport of it. Dessert is the only safe haven. Dates, figs, maybe a honey cake if the gods are kind. You savour every bite, because at least dessert can't look back at you. Still, by the end of lunch, you're full, anxious, and a little sweaty. Not because of the food, but because of the social tightrope you've just walked. As the guests rise from the table, you breathe a sigh of relief. You've survived another Roman lunch. No one has died, and you only mildly offended your neighbour by suggesting the flamingo tasted familiar. You escape to your garden, already dreading the next invitation, because in ancient Rome, lunch isn't about sustenance. It's about survival, one suspicious dish at a time. The rich nap in the afternoon, which sounds relaxing, except every minute not spent networking is a minute closer to being exiled. On paper, nothing says living the dream like an afternoon siesta in a grand Roman villa. The cool shadows stretch across your mosaic floors, a gentle breeze teases the curtains, and somewhere in the distance a fountain gurgles like it's auditioning for a travel brochure. You recline on a couch, eyes half closed, belly full of flamingo, unfortunately, and the whole world seems to hush. In theory, this is the life. In practice, it's a minefield of paranoia and missed opportunity. See, everyone in Rome knows the true purpose of the siesta isn't rest, it's reputation management. Taking a nap is a luxury, but it's also a calculated risk. If you snooze too long, you might miss an important visitor, a bit of spicy gossip, or, worst of all, a chance to be seen by exactly the right people. In Roman society, perception is everything. If your rivals catch wind that you're dozing instead of plotting, they might interpret your nap as a sign of weakness. Did you hear? Marcus spent the whole afternoon asleep. Must be getting soft, or sick, or plotting treason in his dreams. The rumour mill never sleeps, even if you desperately want to. So you try to nap, but not too deeply. You angle yourself in your best resting statesman pose, in case someone peeks through the door. You keep an eye open for unexpected guests, clients with more requests, friends with more drama, or that one senator who only shows up when he needs to borrow money. Every sigh, every twitch, every accidental snore is ammunition for someone else's next anecdote at dinner. And then there's the staff. Your household slaves treat your siesta like a military operation. Curtains are drawn, sandals are removed with the delicacy of a jewel heist, and the air is perfumed with lavender, not for your pleasure but to mask the faint odor of last night's garum incident. Still, the villa is never truly quiet. Somewhere, a servant drops a tray. Someone else starts arguing over the merits of different olive oils. In the garden, a pet monkey starts shrieking because it spotted its own reflection. You try to drown it out, but the harder you chase sleep, the more it runs away. Then there's the self-imposed guilt. As you lie there, supposedly relaxing, your mind races through an ever-growing list of anxieties. Did you thank the right people for last night's dinner? Should you be writing a letter of recommendation for Gaius Jr., even though you're pretty sure he once stole your sandals? Is your new mosaic impressing your peers or just collecting dust? Should you be buying more Egyptian papyrus futures or investing in that sure-thing African marble mine everyone's talking about? The Roman siesta isn't a break, it's a midday panic attack with cushions. And if, by some miracle, you do manage to drift off, you're not alone for long. The minute you hit REM sleep, someone is at the door. Maybe it's your wife's cousin bringing news of yet another engagement. Maybe it's a business rival pretending to be just in the neighborhood, hoping to catch you off guard and unguarded. You wake with a start, mouth dry, heart racing, toga askew. Nothing says powerful Roman like a pillow crease on your cheek. When you finally give up on sleep, you rise, adjust your tunic, and try to look as if you've just been deep in philosophical thought, not drooling into your pillow. The afternoon sun is already creeping across the courtyard, and your work is far from over. There are meetings, messages, and the inevitable task of making it all look easy. Because in ancient Rome, even your nap is political. To truly relax is to risk everything. You emerge from your siesta feeling not refreshed, but sharpened. One eye on your rivals, the other on your reputation, and both very much open. Welcome to Roman luxury, where even your dreams are subject to Senate debate. You hit the forum to shop, dodge pickpockets, and overpay for perfume. It's like Black Friday every day, but you're the only one with a wallet. In ancient Rome, the forum is more than a marketplace. It's a sensory overload, a riot of smells, sounds, and ambitions, all wrapped up in a cloud of incense and a hint of body odor. For the rich, shopping is less about necessity and more about maintaining appearances, and you know that every purchase is a performance. You leave your villa flanked by 2 slaves, one to carry the purchases, one to keep an eye on your sandals, mentally rehearsing your haggling face and praying your tunic doesn't look last season. The moment you step into the square, you're hit with chaos. Every stallholder is a carnival barker, yelling about the freshness of their olives or the miraculous power of their imported Egyptian eyeliner. They all want your attention, and more importantly, your denarii. The fishmonger tries to upsell you the world's saddest-looking sturgeon. The cheesemonger swears on Jupiter that his wares are aged to perfection, which is a poetic way of saying slightly dangerous. You nod, smile, and move on, clutching your coin purse like it's a family heirloom. And you'd better. The pickpockets in the forum are professionals, and they love nothing more than a distracted patrician. Every time you pause to examine a statue or sniff a suspiciously floral perfume, someone's already plotting how to relieve you of your spare change. You try to keep one hand on your money and one eye on your surroundings, but it's exhausting. You quickly learn that the only safe place for your valuables is somewhere nobody wants to touch, like inside your sandal, or better yet, inside your mouth. Not recommended. You make your way to the fabric stalls because your wife insists that Egyptian linen is the only thing fit for your next dinner party. The merchant presents you with bolts of cloth in every shade, none of which look quite right. but all of which are outrageously expensive. He assures you that this shade of blue was worn by Cleopatra herself. You don't believe him, but you buy 2 bolts anyway, because you'd rather face bankruptcy than another argument about table settings. Next, it's time for perfume, an absolute must-have in a world where daily bathing is optional and public transit involves sitting next to livestock. You select a tiny vial. The merchant claims it contains essence of rare eastern lilies, and you're pretty sure it's just olive oil with a sprig of something that might be basil. But you pay double, because the alternative is smelling like you spent the day wrestling goats in the sun. As you continue shopping, you pass philosophers holding impromptu lectures, politicians gathering crowds, and poets reciting verses for anyone who will listen or pay. Someone tries to sell you a slightly used set of bronze armor. Another offers genuine relics of Hercules. You smile, shake your head, and remember the time you actually bought a sacred tooth, only to discover it belonged to a donkey. The Forum is a place where everyone's selling, but not everyone's honest. You're halfway home with your bags, when a street performer's monkey tries to make off with your fruit basket. You give chase, realizing too late that now you look ridiculous, and everyone's watching. A group of children giggles, an old woman tuts, and the monkey escapes with a single overripe fig. Such is life in the Forum. Even the animals are in on the hustle. Before you leave, you treat yourself to a fresh honey cake and a cup of watered wine from a passing vendor. You overpay, but at least you can say you supported local business. You survey your haul, overpriced linen, suspect perfume, and a vague sense of accomplishment. The sun is setting, the stalls are closing, and you limp home, grateful to have only lost a little dignity and a lot of money. Shopping in the Roman Forum isn't about getting what you need. It's about surviving the day with your wallet, your reputation, and at least one unbroken amphora. You arrive back at your villa, exhausted but triumphant, already dreading the next shopping trip. Because in Rome, retail therapy is just another way to remind yourself that, no matter how rich you are, you'll never be rich enough to outsmart the Forum. You tour your villa, noting that your new mosaic is already out of fashion. Your neighbor's garden statue has more abs than your household. Time to buy another fountain. Owning a Roman villa is supposed to be the dream: columns, courtyards, marble floors, and enough spare rooms to lose a small army of relatives. But in reality, it's a never-ending battle against the monster that is elite Roman taste. Every year, the styles change, and your wallet cries out in despair. Your brand new geometric floor mosaic? It took months to commission, features a perfectly smug dolphin, and cost enough to buy a small village. Too bad the latest trend is now mythological scenes in all gold tile. Your mosaic is obsolete, and so, apparently, is your entire personality. You wander into the atrium, admiring the splash of light from your expensive skylight, only to notice that the neighbor across the street has just installed one twice the size. Their sunlight is somehow brighter, their water basin deeper, and, most insultingly, their household cat is now the talk of the block for having its own personal marble plinth. Your cat just licked itself in the corner and promptly fell asleep. The competition is real, and it's exhausting. Everywhere you look, your eyes land on yesterday's triumphs that have already become today's embarrassments. Your painted walls, once the envy of every dinner guest, now seem faded compared to Gaius's imported Egyptian pigments. You briefly consider repainting with something more dramatic, maybe scenes of the Nile, or at the very least, some heroic figure who isn't just a badly disguised version of yourself. Even your statues seem a little underwhelming these days. That Hercules in the garden? Sure, he's got biceps, but your neighbor's Venus is so detailed that even the household staff blushes when they walk by. There's no respite in the garden either. Once, your pond with its solitary bronze duck was the last word in luxury. Now everyone has a pond, most have a small flotilla of ornamental swans, and one senator reportedly imported an actual crocodile for authenticity. Your shrubs are sculpted into vague shapes, but across the fence, someone has commissioned an entire mythological scene in topiary. The gods on Mount Olympus had less foliage, and The fountains. Oh, the fountains. Your villa started with a modest trickle in the corner. Then the neighbours upgraded, so you had to as well. Now you have not one, but 3 fountains, each more elaborate than the last. The current centerpiece features a cherub wrestling a dolphin, but you overheard at last night's banquet that Gaius is unveiling a fountain with singing nymphs and possibly pyrotechnics. How do you compete with that? You wonder if anyone's ever tried floating a whole orchestra on a pond just for shock value. The pressure extends indoors. New trends in lamps, carpets, even the shapes of doorways arrive every season, each one promising to make last year's design look as outdated as a Republican calendar. Your wife points out that the cushions are no longer in, and you spend a small fortune ordering a shipment from Syria. The shipment gets delayed, so you buy some local pillows to tide you over. And now your atrium is a confusing blend of Persian and Etruscan styles, avant-garde, as you tell your guests. While praying, no one asks too many questions. Even the kitchen isn't safe. Marble counters, bronze pots, painted plates, and a special cabinet for storing unusual imported spices all compete for space and status. The latest must-have is a clay oven shaped like a miniature pantheon for the discerning baker. You haven't baked a loaf of bread in your life, but you buy one anyway. Now the cook is complaining, the cat is sleeping in it, and you're considering using it as a planter. By the end of your tour, you realize that in the race for the best decorated villa, nobody really wins. There's always someone with more statues, better marble, or a peacock that sings on command. You sigh, pat your sad dolphin mosaic, and start making plans for next season's improvements. Because in Rome, home is where the heart is, and also where the anxiety lives, usually somewhere between the new atrium fountain and that suspiciously muscular statue of Apollo. Tonight you're hosting a feast. No pressure, but if the wine isn't older than your grandmother, you'll be the talk of the city, for all the wrong reasons. Hosting a banquet in ancient Rome is less about celebrating and more about performing a high-stakes magic trick with food, wine, and social maneuvering. The minute you send out invitations, your fate is sealed. Word spreads fast. Neighbors speculate, rivals sharpen their best toasts, and your mother-in-law drops hints about what the better families served last Saturnalia. You're suddenly on a tightrope, balancing extravagance, taste, and the very real fear of being outdone by Gaius, who once served a peacock stuffed with dormice and followed it up with a synchronized poetry recital. Preparations begin at dawn. Slaves rush around the villa like caffeinated ants, scouring the market for the freshest fish, the weirdest fruits, and a wine that at least looks ancient. Your steward mutters about missing garum shipments and a suspiciously lean batch of oysters. Your chef, a temperamental genius imported from Alexandria, insists on flamingo as the centerpiece, because everyone's bored with lark tongues. You're not convinced, but at this point, you'd agree to serve roasted centaur if it meant outshining your neighbor. The guest list is a labyrinth of politics and potential pitfalls. Invite too many people, and the event looks desperate. Too few, and you risk offending someone's ambitious cousin. The seating chart is its own nightmare. Should you seat the new senator next to the poet with a grudge? Can you trust your uncle not to recite his tragic epic again? Even the gods would need divine intervention to arrange this crowd without incident. As the sun sets, your villa is transformed. Lamps are lit, fountains bubble cheerfully, and floral garlands hide the fact that your new mosaic still isn't quite dry. Guests arrive in waves, cloaks swirling, rings flashing, each one inspecting your decor with the barely concealed hunger of a property assessor. You offer them a taste of the special wine, which is, in reality, just last year's vintage rebottled with a convincing story. It's not deception, it's tradition. Dinner begins with appetizers meant to awe, stuffed eggs, sea urchins, pickled vegetables sculpted into the shape of famous philosophers. At least, that's what you tell everyone. The conversation is equally performative. Every guest takes a turn describing their latest villa improvements, their most recent lawsuit, or their plans for a new garden shrine. You smile, nod, and mentally tally up which stories to steal for your next party. Then, the procession of main courses. Flamingo, check. Spiced boar, check. A mysterious stew involving imported fruit, check. All arranged in extravagant platters that require 2 slaves and a minor prayer to carry. The true centerpiece, however, is the wine. It must be old, expensive, and preferably from a vineyard, so exclusive it only exists in legends. As the amphorae are cracked open, the room holds its breath. One false step, a cork that crumbles, a whiff of vinegar, and you'll never hear the end of it. There's entertainment, of course. A lyre player strums in the corner while a troupe of dancers tries to avoid colliding with tipsy senators. A poet recites lines no one really understands, but everyone applauds, pretending to grasp the deeper meaning. Someone's pet monkey attempts to steal a fig from the dessert table, and it's the highlight of the evening. Throughout the night, you keep an eye on your guests, searching for the telltale signs of success: laughter, genuine or otherwise, empty platters, and most importantly, guests who stay late, reluctant to leave your glittering disaster behind. When the last guest finally stumbles out, you collapse onto a chair, triumphant but exhausted. You survived another Roman banquet. You've outlasted the gossip. For now, outwitted the competition, and maybe, just maybe, served wine old enough to keep the Julii guessing. But as you survey the chaos, crumbled garlands, overturned amphorae, a sleeping senator under the table, you know it won't be long before someone else sends out invitations. In Rome, the party never ends, it just moves next door, and the stakes keep rising. The meal drags on, interrupted only by a slave tripping, a dog stealing roast peacock, and your cousin trying to recite bad poetry. You long for bed, but dessert hasn't even started. Welcome to the Roman dinner party. Less a meal, more a test of endurance and social survival. All played out on velvet cushions beneath a ceiling painted with someone else's family tree. You recline, trying to look regal and well-fed, while your elbow slowly falls asleep on the world's most uncomfortable pillow. Around you, guests lie in various states of dramatic exhaustion, fanning themselves with napkins and exchanging glances that say, "If you pretend to laugh at the host's joke, I'll do the same for you." It begins with a parade of appetizers that are less about flavor and more about status. There are trays of garum-drenched shellfish, eggs pickled in things best left mysterious, and vegetables carved into shapes you're pretty sure aren't found in nature. Slaves move silently, except when they don't, bearing platters and goblets, and someone always manages to knock over a jug of wine with all the subtlety of a chariot crash. The dog, a supposedly decorative part of the household, prowls underfoot, waiting for the moment your attention drifts so it can claim a drumstick and your dignity. Your uncle, never one to miss a chance for a captive audience, launches into a lengthy reminiscence about his days in Gaul, complete with mimed battle scenes and sound effects. The assembled guests muster polite applause, but you can see in their eyes that most would rather be anywhere else, possibly even in Gaul. Meanwhile, your cousin seizes the opportunity to try out his latest poetry. It's long, it's tragic, and it rhymes with very little, if anything at all. You contemplate accidentally knocking over your own wine just to create a distraction. By the time the main courses arrive, peacock, boar, something that might once have been an eel, conversation has devolved into a mix of gossip, philosophical debates, and increasingly elaborate compliments about the host's taste in napkin embroidery. The senator next to you claims to detect notes of mountain air and moral fortitude in his wine. You wonder if he's drinking from the same amphora as you, or if he's simply hallucinating. You reach that stage of the evening when you're not sure if you're hungry, tired, or just emotionally numb. More platters appear, piled high with lentils, honey cakes, and some kind of dish involving pine nuts and regret. At this point, the slaves are working overtime, weaving between sprawled guests and dropping plates only once every third lap, a house record. Laughter rises and falls, and someone starts singing an off-key hymn to Bacchus, which only encourages the monkey in the garden to chime in. The hours stretch and bend, The oil lamps burn low. You sneak a glance at the sky, wondering if it's possible to fake an urgent message from your astrologer. Mars is in retrograde. Must leave immediately. But etiquette demands you remain until the host makes the first move. The conversation turns, as it always does, to philosophy. Someone quotes Seneca, someone else argues for Epicurus, and you try not to fall asleep with your mouth open. Finally, the promise of dessert. A mountain of fruit, candied nuts, and honey-sweetened pastries is paraded in. But your appetite left around hour 4. The monkey attempts a final heist, leaping for the figs, and manages to upstage your cousin's poetry. For this, you are eternally grateful. When the host finally signals the end, usually with a dramatic toast or a discreetly staged feint, you rise, limbs creaking, brain buzzing with too much wine and too little sense. You congratulate yourself for surviving yet another Roman dinner, resisting the urge to sprint for the door. Tomorrow your feet will ache and your toga will smell like spilled garum, but you'll have stories to share. In Rome, the feast is never just about the food. It's about who you endure it with, who you outlast, and whether you can sneak home before someone corners you for just one more round of poetry. Everyone's smiling, but someone's plotting your downfall. You dodge accusations about your latest building project and make a mental note never to trust anyone named Lucius. Roman high society is a world of masks. You smile, you toast, you flatter, and all the while, you're quietly measuring the distance between your back and the nearest available dagger. The richer you are, the more attention you attract, and not just from the hopeful poor, but from your own so-called friends. Every gathering, every dinner party, every stroll through the forum is a minefield of rumors and accidental betrayals. Your day starts with a casual visit from your neighbor, who's always just passing by with a basket of suspiciously nice fruit and a question about your new villa extension. You accept the figs with your best senatorial smile, already suspecting this is less about hospitality and more about reconnaissance. Within hours, the local grapevine is abuzz with whispers. Did you hear? He's building a new wing. Must have gotten a secret loan. Or maybe a bribe. Definitely something shady. You find yourself wishing you'd just planted more olive trees and called it a day. At lunch, the sabotage is more subtle. Your cousin Lucius, yes, him again, sits across the table, pouring you wine and praise in equal measure. He loudly compliments your mosaic, then quietly mentions how strange it is that so many of your workers are new in town. The implication floats over the breadbasket. Are you hiring skilled craftsmen or harboring criminals? You laugh, brush it off, and mentally add Lucius to the ever-growing list of people to keep at arm's length, preferably behind a locked gate. Evening brings a dinner party at Gaius's villa. Everyone is all smiles, draped in their finest togas and practicing the ancient Roman art of compliment, then condemn. A senator's wife raves about your garden, then sighs about the tragic fate of those who expand too quickly. Another guest reminisces about your uncle's infamous bankruptcy, noting how history always finds a way to repeat itself. You nod, sip your wine, and consider faking a sudden bout of plague to escape early. Meanwhile, the real scandals bubble just beneath the surface. Last week, a rumor broke that a prominent family was using imported marble of questionable origin. The next day, their main fountain mysteriously stopped working, and the stonemason they'd hired was nowhere to be found. You watch, listen, and wonder which of your own projects will be the next target. You'd like to believe your friends want what's best for you, but in Rome, what's best is usually what benefits them. In the Senate, things aren't much better. Laws are passed and projects approved in public, but the real power plays happen behind closed doors, over too much wine and too little honesty. Your rival proposes a new law that coincidentally will force you to pay extra taxes on your recently acquired property. You recognize the move for what it is, an open invitation to retaliate, preferably with a well-timed rumor about his suspiciously successful grain shipments. Then there's the mail. Anonymous letters slip under your door, warning you about plots and betrayals, or offering helpful advice in exchange for a discreet bag of coins. Sometimes you're not even sure if these notes are threats or invitations to brunch. Either way, you burn them after reading, just in case. Trust is a rare and fragile commodity in Roman high society. Every friend is a potential rival, every favor comes with a price, and every alliance is one bad harvest away from collapse. You learn to sleep lightly, invest in good locks, and never ever eat figs that Lucius brings over without a taste tester. Yet, for all the danger, there's a twisted thrill to the whole thing. The games, the gossip, the endless dance of reputation and ruin. Some days, you almost enjoy the challenge. After all, if you can survive Roman scandals, you can survive anything, except maybe Lucius's poetry. In the end, you step out into the Roman sun, feeling just a little more paranoid, but also a little more alive. Because in this world, if you're not watching your back, you're probably already losing. You retreat to your bedroom, which is enormous but drafty. You try to sleep, but your sheets itch. Thanks, imported wool. And you suspect your neighbor is planning a coup at sunrise. If you think that being rich in ancient Rome means drifting peacefully off to sleep, think again. Bedtime is less a sanctuary and more the start of a new round of subtle torture. You lie in a room large enough to stage a small play. Columns, marble busts, and enough echo to host your own insomnia. Your bed is a magnificent wooden frame, set high off the ground and so full of stuffing that you need a running start to clamber in. The mattress is stuffed with imported feathers, horsehair, or sometimes the wool of a particularly cranky sheep, none of which combine for what you'd call comfort. First, there's the matter of the sheets. Yes, they're expensive. Yes, they were dyed in Tyre and sailed across half the known world, but that doesn't make them soft. The wool itches, the linen is scratchy, and you have a nagging suspicion that your bedding doubles as a training ground for the city's entire flea population. Every night is a wrestling match with your own blanket, hoping you'll emerge in the morning with all your skin intact. If you're lucky, the household slaves have remembered to air out the bed. If not, you're in for a night of mysterious smells and the endless company of nocturnal insects with a taste for imported blood. You try to relax, but your mind is buzzing. There's always something keeping you awake. Was that the wind rattling the shutters? Or is Gaius next door finally staging his long-threatened coup? Should you have said yes to that senator's proposal about aqueduct repairs, or is your refusal going to make you tomorrow's headline in the gossip scrolls? Maybe the ancient wine at dinner was a little too ancient, and now you're fighting off both a headache and the creeping sense that your rival's toast was more curse than compliment. The sounds of Rome at night do not help. Outside, dogs bark, drunken revelers sing, and the occasional street brawl erupts just beneath your expensive window. Somewhere in the distance, a night watchman shouts the hour, usually just as you're drifting off. If you leave the window open for a breeze, you get a symphony of city noise and a fresh serving of street dust. If you close it, your room transforms into a humid tomb, trapping every aroma from the banquet hall below. There's the security factor too. No one sleeps easy in a house full of valuables, and Rome's wealthy know better than to trust a locked door. You make the nightly rounds, checking shutters, bolting doors, counting the family silver twice for luck. You consider posting a guard at the entrance, but the last time you did that, he fell asleep and started snoring louder than the dogs outside. You debate inviting a pet dog onto your bed, but the last time you tried, it commandeered your pillow and barked at your own feet for half the night. Finally, after tossing, scratching, and rehearsing tomorrow's diplomatic apologies, you drift into a fitful sleep, only to wake up hours later, heart pounding, certain you heard someone whisper senator outside your door. It turns out to be the cat. Again, Roman insomnia is not a solitary experience. Your spouse might be tossing beside you, grumbling about your cousin Lucius's latest scandal. Your children, or more likely a surprise cousin visiting just for a week, may be giggling 2 rooms away inventing new ways to break the furniture. Even your dreams are interrupted by the ghosts of unfinished business, debts unpaid, feasts unreturned, togas unworn. Morning comes too soon. You rise groggy, covered in mysterious bites, your grand room echoing with the sound of another day's ambition gearing up outside. You try to look refreshed as your personal attendant draws back the curtains, but you know the truth. In ancient Rome, bedtime is just another arena to prove your endurance. You survived one more night. The city is awake, the intrigue is already brewing, and you're left scratching at your sheets, wondering if there's a better way to sleep, or if that's just another luxury Rome hasn't quite invented yet. You brush your teeth with ground bones and rinse with vinegar. Fresh breath? Maybe. Bleeding gums? Absolutely. You'd think that with all your money, you could buy your way into a relaxing morning routine. Instead, personal hygiene in ancient Rome is a collection of weird rituals, questionable science, and a surprising amount of bodily discomfort, sort of like a modern wellness retreat, only with fewer smoothies and more tooth powder made out of crushed animal parts. You start your day facing the bathroom mirror, or, more accurately, a burnished piece of bronze that kind of reflects your face if you squint just right. Your personal slave stands by, holding a tiny cup of the latest dental innovation. Tooth powder made from ground animal bones, charred hooves, oyster shells, and maybe a pinch of burnt bread, if you're feeling fancy. The more exotic, the better. Last week, your cousin insisted on adding powdered mouse teeth. You remind yourself never to take grooming advice from him again. You dab your dampened finger into the powder and start scrubbing. There's no such thing as a soft bristle brush. It's all friction and hope. The sensation is exactly what you'd expect from rubbing rocks on your teeth, gritty, unpleasant, and occasionally alarming when you taste something that might be old garlic. The Romans are big believers in abrasives, which explains why most people's smiles look like they've been sandblasted. But hey, at least your breath will smell faintly of the fish market, if not worse. Once your gums are thoroughly punished, it's time for the vinegar rinse. Some call it mouthwash, others call it a punishment from Bacchus. You swish and swirl, eyes watering, as the sharp liquid stings every microscopic wound in your mouth. You remind yourself that this is the price of social success. Bad breath in Rome is a serious crime, especially if you plan on debating in the Senate or whispering about your neighbor's new fountain at dinner. Hair care isn't much easier. The Roman elite adore intricate hairstyles, curls, braids, and all sorts of elaborate updos, maintained by a small army of slaves armed with combs, olive oil, and sometimes beeswax. If you're a man, your options are simpler, but not painless. Your barber's idea of a shave involves a bronze razor, a quick prayer to Mercury, and enough olive oil to lubricate a chariot. Miss a spot, and someone will notice at the forum. Cut yourself, and you'll smell like a vinaigrette for the rest of the day. Bathing is another ordeal altogether. Yes, there are public baths, and yes, being rich means you can afford a private one. But private is relative. There are still slaves around to help with scrubbing, oiling, and offering commentary on the state of your elbows. The bath itself is a multi-step process, a warm soak, followed by an oily massage, then a good scraping with a metal strigil. No soap, just olive oil and optimism. Dirt and sweat are scraped away, and you pretend not to notice the debris collecting in a little pile at your feet. For fragrance, you dab yourself with imported perfumes, usually something floral and strong enough to stun a small animal. Everyone does this, partly to smell nice, mostly to cover up whatever the baths and scraping didn't quite eliminate. There's always someone in your circle who goes overboard, a walking bouquet of lilies, roses, and the subtle undertone of desperation. Dressed and ready, you face the day with cleanish teeth, burning gums, and a lingering suspicion that you've accidentally invented a new kind of mouth ulcer. Your peers will notice if you skip a step. Rome's gossip grapevine is as ruthless about hygiene as it is about dinner parties. So, you soldier on, because in ancient Rome, It's not enough to be rich and powerful. You also have to smell like a demigod, endure a daily dental apocalypse, and smile through the pain. Fresh breath? Maybe. But the real reward is knowing you survived another morning without being whispered about for your halitosis. Small victories, Roman style. Illness is terrifying. You consult the household gods, the family doctor, and anyone who swears by boiled owl's feet. Your only certainty is that you can't trust the tap water. In ancient Rome, catching a cold isn't just an inconvenience. It's a cosmic event requiring the full resources of your villa, your faith, and your coin purse. It always starts the same way. A tickle in your throat, a chill down your spine, and suddenly the entire household is mobilized like you've been struck by lightning. Your slaves whisper, your spouse wrings their hands, and your mother-in-law starts listing relatives who never recovered from a sniffle. The collective anxiety in the room is thicker than the steam in the caldarium. First, you turn to the household gods. The lares and penates are supposed to keep your family safe, but now you're not sure you've left them enough cake offerings. You quickly stage a mini ritual at the family shrine. Wine, a coin, and that honey cake you were saving for breakfast. It's not just superstition, it's damage control. Your spouse lights extra incense and mutters a few prayers for good measure, just in case the gods have a soft spot for overachievers. Next comes the family doctor. If you're lucky, it's the trusted Greek physician who's at least read a few scrolls on anatomy. If not, you get whichever healer was available at the market, carrying a bag of tools that could double as torture devices and a list of cures that sound like they were invented by a particularly cruel trickster god. The diagnosis is usually vague, something about imbalanced humors or bad air. The prescription? Bloodletting, wine, or the application of various smelly poultices. The doctor assures you these are time-tested remedies, but you notice he winces every time you cough. Meanwhile, word gets out that you're ill, and suddenly your house is full of people offering advice. An elderly aunt arrives with a jar of boiled owl's feet, insisting you must rub them on your temples at sunset. The neighbor claims a tea of wormwood and pickled turnips will cure the chills. Even your favorite slave suggests carrying a live frog in your pocket for a day, just in case. You accept every remedy, not because you believe them, but because in Rome, refusing advice is worse than being sick. Hydration is its own special gamble. Water is suspicious at best, unless it comes straight from your own aqueduct, and even then, you trust it about as far as you can throw a senator. Wine is safer, so you drink it by the cupful, hoping the alcohol will kill whatever invisible menace has crawled into your bones. The result? You're slightly more cheerful, but just as sick. And your physician is now worried about your wine imbalance. There's no winning. Rest is recommended, but sleep is impossible. Your bed is full of hot bricks, warm towels, and the constant hum of nervous relatives. Your spouse wakes you hourly to check your pulse or apply a new poultice. You can't escape the parade of concerned visitors, each one bringing a new remedy or a story of someone who died after ignoring an identical symptom. The stress of surviving your illness might be more dangerous than the illness itself. For the truly desperate, you consult an oracle who offers cryptic advice involving 3 white chickens and a night spent under the stars. You humor her, because at this point you'll try anything. You even consider that the gods might have a sense of humor and are simply waiting to see how many weird rituals you'll attempt before feeling better. Eventually, you either recover miraculously, and with the credit split equally between the gods, your doctor, and your aunt's owl feet, or you don't. If you survive, the whole household celebrates. You make a token donation to the temple and promise to never complain about scratchy sheets again. Being sick in ancient Rome is a full-time job, part medical mystery, part religious ritual, part community theatre. You never know what works, but you do learn that hope, wine, and a willingness to try absolutely anything are essential, and that next time you should probably skip the cold bath after dinner, just in case the gods are watching. Indoor plumbing sounds great until your pipes clog, the bathhouse floods, or someone decides to poison the well. You consider switching to wine, like everyone else. Let's be honest, one of the big perks of being rich in ancient Rome is supposed to be all that cutting-edge plumbing. You've got your own running water, pipes made of sturdy lead and clay, aqueducts funneling mountain springs right into your kitchen, private baths you don't have to share with the masses unless you're showing off, which you inevitably do. In theory, you should be living the high life, sipping cold water under a marble fountain, while peasants haul buckets up 7 flights of stairs. In reality, you spend more time managing disasters than enjoying the luxury. The first problem is the pipes. Lead might be the wonder material of the age, but nobody warns you that it's also heavy, brittle, and tiny detail, kind of poisonous. But that's not your biggest concern. No, your daily drama is a never-ending battle with clogs, leaks, and unexplained odors. One day you turn on your bath tap, and instead of a gentle stream, you get a wheezing cough and a gout of rusty water. Your slaves descend with an arsenal of pokers, rags, and prayers to the household gods. Sometimes they fix it. Sometimes you have to call in a professional, a plumber, whose main qualification is owning a bigger stick. Then there's the flooding. A little water is a blessing, too much, and your mosaic floors are suddenly the Tiber Delta. The pipes in your walls groan like a dying senator, and one morning you step out of bed straight into a puddle the size of a Roman legion. You call for towels, sand, anything to stop the flow, and for a moment you wonder if Neptune himself is personally offended by your new dolphin statue. Meanwhile, your neighbor's house seems dry as a bone, and you can already hear the rumors swirling. Did you hear about the flood? Terrible omen. Probably angered the gods. Or worse, hired cheap plumbers. You try to ignore it, but paranoia is an ancient Roman specialty. What if your plumbing woes aren't an accident? Poisoning the water supply is an old trick. You start to wonder if that friend who offered you a new pipe fitting last week is actually trying to bump you off. You have slaves taste test your water before every bath, which only makes them more nervous. The bathhouse attendants start whispering, and suddenly every stomachache is evidence of a new plot. If you do make it to the bath without drama, it's still no guarantee of a good soak. The temperature is never quite right, either freezing cold or hot enough to peel olives. The drains are slow, the marble is slippery, and at least one frog seems to have taken up residence in your favorite pool. You consider complaining, but then you remember the last senator who moaned about his bathwater. The story made it all the way to the Senate floor, and he's still known as Lucius, the lukewarm. And then there's the public baths, where you can't escape plumbing problems no matter how rich you are. The pipes back up, the water runs brown, and you're not sure whether you're being exfoliated by a strigil or just another piece of travelling gravel. You quietly envy the people who just haul their own water from the river. Sure, it's undignified, but at least they know what's in it. In the end, you're left with a complicated relationship with water. You need it, you crave it, but you never quite trust it. You pour yourself another cup of wine, safest liquid in Rome, gaze at your increasingly suspicious fountain, and make a mental note to sacrifice to Neptune just in case. Because in ancient Rome, plumbing is both miracle and menace, a luxury that never lets you forget. It can become a curse at any moment. Enjoy that indoor bath while you can. Tomorrow, the pipes might have other plans. You try to relax with your pet dog, but your neighbor has imported a monkey, and the senator across the street has a pet leopard. You quietly fear for your toes. In ancient Rome, pets are the ultimate status symbol, another battleground where the wealthy compete for attention, admiration, and, occasionally, animal control. You might think that a loyal dog, curled up at your feet, would be enough. But Roman society is not built on contentment. It's built on showing off. If someone else has a dog, you get a bigger one. If they have a clever dog, you get a cleverer dog, or a clever snake, or a slightly deranged monkey wearing gold earrings and a bad attitude. The trend for exotic pets among the rich has turned the streets of Rome into an ongoing parade of why is that in your house. It started harmlessly enough: lapdogs, parrots, maybe a charming turtle for the garden fountain. Then someone brought home a gazelle. Next came peacocks. Then a senator with a flair for the dramatic decided to acquire a baby leopard as a conversation piece. You shudder every time you see him walking the beast on a gold chain, pretending it's perfectly normal while neighbors quickly close their doors and scoop up their children. Your own dog, loyal and mild-mannered, now seems disappointingly conventional. You briefly consider a peacock, but last year's feather incident, don't ask, has left you wary. You flirt with the idea of a monkey, inspired by Gaius's antics next door. But after one afternoon spent chasing the neighbor's monkey off your mosaic, you decide your nerves and your silverware can't take it. Monkeys, it turns out, have a particular fondness for theft, mischief, and inventing new ways to insult the household staff. Some go further. The wealthiest Romans commission snake charmers, hoping to impress dinner guests with the sight of a python draped across the atrium. You're not sure if this is a flex or a cry for help. One guest at last month's feast fainted when a garland of flowers turned out to be, in fact, a live corn snake. The host, ever the showman, declared it good luck. You have your doubts. Birds are another popular option, and not just ordinary birds. Gaius boasts a collection of nightingales and doves. Another family keeps a flock of imported flamingos. Never mind that they shriek like banshees at sunrise and terrify the local cats. Meanwhile, the senator with the leopard insists he's working his way up to something truly impressive, which has everyone on the block sleeping a little less soundly. With great pets come great responsibilities and great hazards. Every day brings new drama. Monkeys stealing jewels, leopards chasing messenger boys, snakes escaping from secure enclosures. You wonder if the chaos is worth the social clout. Last week, your own dog was startled by a turtle, and in the resulting stampede, 2 amphorae and your dignity were smashed. The slaves now keep a careful eye on the garden, patrolling for runaway animals and guests who can't handle the menagerie. And yet you can't help but get swept up in it. A pet in Rome is more than a companion. It's a living testament to your wealth, your worldliness, and, if you're honest, your need to outshine your peers. You find yourself idly flipping through a scroll about exotic animals of the provinces, wondering how difficult it really is to import a mongoose, or if a well-behaved ibex might be the next big thing. At the end of the day, you settle for a scratch behind your dog's ears and a wary glance at the window, half expecting the neighbor's monkey to come rappelling down with your missing sandals. In Rome, even relaxing is competitive. But as your dog thumps his tail and the sun sets over the city, you decide that maybe the best pets are the ones that don't try to eat your guests. Still, you can't shake the feeling that tomorrow someone will show up with a camel, and when they do, you'll politely pretend not to notice while making a mental note to ask your steward about elephant prices, just in case. You're rich, but everyone is in debt to someone. You owe money to your cousin, who owes money to a senator, who owes money to literally everyone in Egypt. In ancient Rome, being wealthy isn't so much about how much you have, but how much you owe, and to whom. Forget the gold coins stacked in your cellar or the elaborate mosaics under your feet. Real Roman luxury is measured in anxiety. It's a delicate balance. You borrow to build a new villa, then borrow again to throw a feast worthy of gossip, then take out another loan to buy that suspiciously shiny horse your neighbor was flaunting at last week's races. The result? A tangled web of IOUs, secret handshakes, and favors that never, ever seem to be repaid. It starts innocently enough. A cousin comes to you for a small loan, just enough to tide him over until his next shipment of Spanish olive oil arrives. You say yes, because in Rome, family loyalty is sacred, and refusing is basically inviting a curse, or at least an awkward dinner conversation for the next decade. Next thing you know, your cousin is late on his payments. But it's fine because he's already lent money to Senator Fabius, who's apparently a little behind due to an unforeseen marble statue emergency. Senator Fabius, for his part, has a list of creditors stretching all the way to Alexandria, each waiting patiently, or not so patiently, for a return on their investment. This is the Roman economy in action, a carousel of debts, each one spinning just fast enough that nobody actually falls off, unless, of course, they do. One missed payment, one failed harvest, and suddenly you're not just the life of the party, you're the subject of hushed rumors in the forum. "Did you hear about his debts?" someone whispers. "He owes more than a vestal's dowry. I heard he's mortgaged his bathhouse, and he's still ordering flamingo for lunch." The scandal isn't being in debt, it's letting anyone see you sweat. To keep up appearances, you host another banquet, pour more imported wine, and commission yet another garish mosaic. You reassure everyone, your creditors, your family, yourself, that the next big shipment, the next inheritance, or that villa on the Bay of Naples will solve everything. In truth, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, who is quietly robbing you right back. Of course, there's always the moneylender. In Rome, these shadowy figures are everywhere, operating in the back rooms of the forum or hovering at the edge of every social gathering, ready to offer bridge loans with interest rates so high they make your head spin. You promise yourself you'll never stoop so low. Then a pipe bursts, your wife insists on Egyptian pearls, and before you know it, you're haggling with a man who collects debts the way other people collect statues. Payback is its own form of theatre. You have to be seen settling some debts quickly, with a flourish, just to show the world you're solvent. For the others, you delay, distract, and charm. You send gifts to creditors, exotic fruit baskets, rare fish, a monkey if you're feeling desperate. You hope these distractions buy you time, or at least a little goodwill. The worst-case scenario? Being dragged into court where your rivals can gloat and the gossip columnists sharpen their quills. It's a nerve-wracking cycle, but it's one everyone plays. Even Caesar was deep in debt before he started conquering Gaul. You remind yourself that, as long as you look prosperous and keep the wine flowing, most people will keep lending you money. And so you do what Romans do best. Throw another party, make another promise, and pray the next loan comes through before the last one is called in. By sunset, you're exhausted, broke, and more than a little jittery. You tell yourself you'll settle your accounts tomorrow, but tonight there's a senator to impress and a new mosaic to unveil. In Rome, it's not about how much you owe, it's about how long you can keep the game going and whether you can still smile while doing it. You start planning your will and realize half your family is mysteriously eager for you to catch a mysterious chill. You sleep with one eye open and the other on your will. In ancient Rome, the real family sport isn't chariot racing, it's inheritance. As soon as you mention the words last wishes, your entire family suddenly becomes extremely interested in your health, your sleeping habits, and whether you might like to sample that suspiciously frothy new wine they brought over. There are cousins you haven't seen since Saturnalia, now popping by with just a little something for your cough. Aunt Flavia's secret recipe for longevity looks suspiciously like lukewarm cabbage water, and your nephew offers to fluff your pillow with a little too much enthusiasm. Drafting a will should be straightforward, but not in Rome. Instead, it's a high-stakes game of favourites, flattery, and frantic negotiation. You have to decide which son gets the main villa, which daughter gets the matching set of Egyptian pearls, and whether to leave anything at all to that uncle who still owes you for last year's gladiator tickets. Every day you delay is another day for the family rumour mill to spin up new theories. He's leaving everything to the temple. He's giving the estate to the pet monkey. I heard he's secretly writing a will in Greek, just to spite us all. There's no such thing as privacy when it comes to your will. As soon as a scribe is seen at your door, relatives start showing up just to check in. They bring you fruit, cheerful banter, and plenty of side-eye as they survey your cough for any sign of escalation. Conversations become loaded. "You're looking well," says your cousin, which you suspect is code for, "How much longer can you last?" Your eldest son wants to discuss future plans. Your youngest insists he's happy with whatever you decide, but always manages to mention his favorite hunting lodge, just in case you're wondering. You know the stakes are high, not just for your family, but for your legacy. Inheritance law in Rome is a minefield. One wrong move, and the wrong relative might contest your will in court. Or worse, show up at your funeral with a brand new lawyer and a pile of witnesses who claim you promised them a vineyard during last year's festival. Romans love a good courtroom drama, especially when it means they might end up with a surprise estate on the coast. If you're really unlucky, you might catch wind of relatives disappearing under mysterious circumstances. That uncle who once stood to inherit half your collection of silver plate, gone to visit the provinces, never to be seen again. The cousin who asked too many questions about your health, suddenly decides to join the priesthood, possibly as a safety measure. You realize the safest way to stay alive is to keep everyone guessing. Change your will often, drop hints in every direction, and maybe leave a generous donation to the local temple, just in case the gods want to weigh in. Writing your will is a performance art. You summon your scribe, dictating with enough drama to fill a Roman theatre. You pause frequently, as if reconsidering every name, every legacy, every item in the cellar. When you're done, you lock the will in a secure chest and instruct 3 separate slaves to keep an eye on it. You'd hire a guard, but last time you tried, the guard's cousin turned out to be engaged to your niece. The family web is stickier than a batch of honey cakes. Even after all this planning, you know the real fun will begin after you're gone. The reading of the will is a spectator sport. Relatives will jostle for position, feign surprise, and launch lawsuits before the ink is dry. If you're really lucky, you'll leave behind enough drama to keep them arguing until the next Saturnalia. Maybe that's the real inheritance, a lifetime of anxiety, a legacy of chaos, and a final round of entertainment for the city's best gossip columnists. So you sleep with one eye open, hoping your will survives, and so do you, until you're ready to edit it again. In Rome, inheritance is the one sport where everyone plays, but only the truly paranoid win. You made it to the end of another exhausting, paranoid, overly perfumed Roman day. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again, assuming you haven't been poisoned at breakfast. As you lie on your impossibly lumpy mattress, still wearing traces of perfume strong enough to ward off both admirers and insects, you're left wondering, was this what you imagined when you pictured the life of a Roman elite? The marble floors, the endless fountains, the banquets that run longer than most marriages, it's all here. So is the overwhelming exhaustion that comes from managing a household, a fortune, and a rotating cast of family members who seem just a little too eager for you to drop your guard or your spoon. You replay the day in your head. The morning started with bread and honey, plus a panic attack about whether the honey was sufficiently foreign. Your sandals were put on for you, which would have felt luxurious if it weren't for the silent judgment radiating from your sandal-slipping staff. The toga, that ancient straitjacket, made its usual attempt at public humiliation. And let's not forget the endless, cheerful parade of clients who expect you to bankroll their lives in exchange for the privilege of being followed around by a pack of professional flatterers. Then came the Senate, hours of debate, drama, and not-so-subtle maneuvering, most of which was settled long before you arrived. Lunch provided a brief, if slightly horrifying, distraction. You're still not sure whether that was actually flamingo or just very colourful chicken. Afternoon naps were impossible, of course. How can you rest when every second spent sleeping is another opportunity for a rival to gain the upper hand? Instead, you found yourself shopping in the Forum, which is a workout for your wallet, your wits, and your sense of personal space. As the sun sank, it was time to host, or attend, yet another banquet, an event that's equal parts culinary spectacle and psychological warfare. The wine was old, the gossip was fresh, and the poetry was bad enough to make the gods weep. The night capped off with dinner disasters, monkey mishaps, and the kind of scandal that only happens when 3 senators, 2 leopards, and a slightly tipsy poet share a table. You spent more time wondering who was plotting against whom than actually enjoying your imported cheese. Bedtime, instead of providing relief, brought only new worries. Your sheets itched, your windows rattled, and your brain replayed every slight, snub, and side-eye you'd endured since sunrise. Did you remember to pay the water carrier? Did you forget to bribe the right doorman? Was that last cup of wine a peace offering, or an assassination attempt in a goblet? And yet, as you drift off to a fitful sleep, half watching the shadows, half planning tomorrow's improvements, you can't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Yes, you're exhausted. Yes, you're slightly paranoid and have developed a mild allergy to purple dye and imported wool. But you survived. You navigated the banquets, the baths, the endless small talk, and even Lucius's poetry. You made it through another day as a Roman elite, still in possession of your fortune, your villa, and most of your reputation. Tomorrow, the games begin again. There will be more clients, more shopping, more gossip, more relatives hoping for a mention in your will. But for tonight at least, you can close your eyes, whisper a quick prayer to the household gods, and try not to dream of dancing flamingos and singing fountains. Because in ancient Rome, survival is its own kind of entertainment, and sometimes making it to bedtime is the biggest triumph of all. Being rich in Rome means every third cousin suddenly remembers you exist. Your atrium is full of relatives just passing through, and you're never sure if they want a loan or are secretly hoping you'll choke on a fig. Family dinners feel less like bonding and more like low-stakes hostage negotiations. It starts innocently enough. One afternoon, as you're trying to enjoy a brief moment of peace with your slightly less fashionable dog, there's a polite knock at the door. It's your mother's cousin's stepson, fresh from the provinces, standing there with a sheepish grin and a bag that's suspiciously heavy. Just in town for business, he claims. Before you can ask what business, he's making himself comfortable on your best couch, helping himself to your honeyed wine, and dropping hints about how hard it is to get ahead these days without a little help from family. Word spreads quickly. Suddenly, your villa transforms into a bustling hostel for every relation who's ever remembered your name, or just knows where you live. Second cousins, great-aunts, step-nephews, all descend with perfect timing. Each brings a carefully rehearsed sob story about lost inheritances, bad investments, or the tragedy of having only 3 sets of clothes for Saturnalia. They flatter your taste in mosaics, marvel at your garden fountain, and strategically mention how nice it must be to have so much space. I could never live this way back in Ostia. One cousin sighs, making pointed eye contact with the spare guest room. The longer they stay, the bolder the requests become. It always starts with just a small loan, or a brief stay until my fortunes turn around. But a week later, your pantry is suspiciously empty, your wine cellar echoing, and your favorite dinner chair mysteriously claimed by your nephew who never gets to sit up front at home. Someone asks to borrow your scribe to pen an urgent letter. Another cousin volunteers to help manage your accounts, and you're fairly certain your jewelry chest now contains slightly fewer rings than before. Dinners become a test of patience and diplomacy. The entire family gathers in the triclinium, each one trying to outdo the other with tales of minor misfortunes and how their lives might be improved with just a tiny investment. The subtext: if you really cared, you'd help me. You sip your wine, nod politely, and try to remember which cousin has already received a loan and which one still owes you from the last family emergency. Occasionally, the conversation turns to inheritance. Someone lets slip, "Of course, when you're gone, this place will feel empty." You consider faking a cough, just to see who looks the most hopeful. Worse still are the ones who offer to help. "Let me manage your estate for a while," suggests a cousin who's never met a ledger he couldn't accidentally set on fire. "I'll oversee the villa renovations," offers an aunt with more opinions than sense. "You could use a little more purple," she says, eyeing your carefully chosen linens with the calculating gaze of a vulture at a feast. You smile, thank them, and mentally calculate how long it will take for them to leave, or if they ever will. The children are no better. Small armies of nieces and nephews stampede through your halls, toppling statues, frightening your peacocks, and teaching the household dog new tricks that involve more barking than you thought possible. Your own peace is shattered, replaced by the unending noise of a family who knows exactly how much you own and is determined to sample every last bit. By the end of the week, you're dreaming of exile, preferably somewhere remote, where the only visitor is the occasional passing goat. But you're a Roman, and hospitality is a duty, or so you remind yourself every night as you count the missing amphorae. Still, you keep your will locked up, your valuables hidden, and your patience just out of reach. Because in Rome, family isn't just an obligation, it's a full-time occupation. And if you're not careful, the next family reunion might just last until your next will is read. You wake up with a cough. Is it the bad air, last night's oysters, or a curse from your neighbor? Roman medicine recommends boiled cabbage, owl eggs, and prayers to 3 different gods. You're left wondering if you're sick or just suffering from ancient hypochondria. In ancient Rome, illness is never just a bug going around. Every sniffle, ache, or suspicious rash triggers a full-scale investigation involving everyone from your household slaves to the local augur. The day starts with a single cough, nothing dramatic, but enough to send your household into a flurry of activity. Your wife immediately blames the wind that blew through the atrium last night. Your steward insists it was the oysters at dinner. Your cousin whispers not so quietly that your neighbor Gaius has been giving you the evil eye since you outbid him for that Egyptian lamp. Before you know it, a council forms around your bed. There's your mother, offering boiled cabbage, because it's soothing for the humours. The household doctor arrives and asks a series of questions. Did you sleep with the window open? Have you angered the household gods? When was the last time you sacrificed a goat? His diagnosis is vague, possibly phlegm, maybe bad air, or worst of all, miasma, the sort of thing that can only be solved by moving, fasting, and burning a lot of incense. The remedies come thick and fast. Your aunt swears by owl eggs poached in wine and honey, served lukewarm at dawn. The neighbour recommends an amulet, preferably something with bits of coral, a scrap of wolf fur, and maybe a coin from a lucky year. Meanwhile, your friend from the Senate tells you that a quick prayer to Asclepius, followed by a generous donation to his temple, will fix almost anything. You do them all because in Rome, being sick is not just physical, it's spiritual, social, and slightly theatrical. There's also the matter of curses. Romans believe strongly in the power of envy and the malocchio, the evil eye. If you're ill, it's almost certainly because someone wants your marble fountain, your favorite slave, or your seat in the Senate. You eye your neighbor's house suspiciously, light an extra lamp in the household shrine, and instruct your slaves to sweep the entryway with a new broom, just to be safe. The household begins to hum with gossip. Did you offend a deity? Forget to honor your ancestors? Did you lend your good luck charm to the wrong cousin? As you choke down cabbage water and owl egg soup, the superstitions multiply. The kitchen staff sprinkles salt at the threshold. Your children are forbidden to speak your name after sundown, in case the spirits overhear. A passing street healer offers to draw out the sickness with a mixture of herbs and possibly a little mild extortion. You pay her, if only to keep her from telling everyone in the forum that you have the curse. After all, reputation in Rome is as fragile as a wax tablet in August. And then, of course, the household gods get involved. You're encouraged to make a small offering, a little wine, a little honey, maybe even a chicken if things get desperate. The family gathers at the hearth, mumbling prayers to Vesta, Asclepius, and Fortuna. You wonder if the gods are rolling their eyes at yet another hypochondriac or secretly enjoying all the extra attention and snacks. By afternoon, you're surrounded by the trappings of Roman healthcare. Herbal poultices, odd amulets, sticky honey, and a small army of relatives waving incense over your head. You don't know if you're actually getting better or just too tired to keep complaining. At some point, you realize that being sick in Rome is less about germs and more about group therapy, social theatre, and outlasting your relatives' enthusiasm for creative remedies. When you finally start to recover, Whether from the cabbage, the prayers, or simply exhaustion, everyone claims credit. The doctor, your aunt, the neighbor, even the gods, via an ecstatic chicken augury. You thank them all, promise to honor the household spirits more regularly, and quietly vow to avoid oysters and open windows for the foreseeable future. Because in Rome, mysterious illnesses aren't just a test of your immune system. They're a crash course in family drama, neighborly suspicion, and the fine art of surviving ancient hypochondria with your dignity, mostly, intact. You paid good money for a marble statue of yourself in the city square. Unfortunately, the sculptor thinks your nose adds character. Every morning you walk by your stone doppelganger, while passers-by comment, not so quietly, on its resemblance to a startled potato. Image management is exhausting. In ancient Rome, public image isn't just about wearing the right cloak or hosting the best banquet. It's a daily performance for an audience of thousands, and nothing cements your reputation, for better or worse, like a slab of marble shaped vaguely in your honor. You dreamed of a statue that would strike awe in the hearts of all who beheld it, a vision of noble Roman virtue, chiseled cheekbones, and the jawline of Jupiter himself. What you got was not that. The artist, a genius recommended by your cousin, decided your most prominent feature was your nose. Now you loom above the forum, eternally wide-eyed, nostrils flared for posterity. You can't avoid it. Every trip to the market, every stroll past the basilica, you're forced to meet your own stony gaze and, worse, overhear the city's running commentary. Look, it's Senator Turnipface again. I think it's supposed to be him, but it looks more like his mother-in-law. One child thoughtfully wonders aloud if the statue was meant as a warning against eating too many figs. You try to walk briskly by, head held high, but the city's sense of humor is relentless. Romans love a good joke, especially when it involves someone else's nose. Of course, you could commission a new statue, but that only makes things worse. One becomes two, then three. Before you know it, half the forum is cluttered with increasingly abstract interpretations of your face. Each new artist claims to capture your essence, which seems to mean a variety of unfortunate proportions. Your rivals pretend to be supportive, but you know they're secretly placing bets on which statue will have the wildest hair or the saddest chin. It's not just statues either. Everything is image. The way you walk, the way you dress, the way you wave to crowds, not too stiff, not too limp. Senator Lucius made that mistake last year and people still call him the lame crane. Even the way you scold your slaves or haggle with vendors is noted, discussed, and, if you're unlucky, imitated at parties by minor poets. Reputation spreads faster than plague in the Subura. If you so much as trip on your toga, you can expect it to be reenacted by mimes on every street corner by sundown. You try to control the narrative. You host more elaborate banquets, donate an ostentatious fountain, and make sure you're seen at all the right temples offering generous sacrifices. You even spread a few stories about your supposed heroism in the last minor fire, how you bravely directed the bucket line, even if it was mostly by shouting from a safe distance. Still, it's the statue that everyone remembers. Managing your public image becomes a second job. You ask your friends to drop compliments in earshot of busy corners. You consider hiring a philosopher to declare your nose the sign of true Roman intellect. But even he can't keep a straight face. You think about moving to the countryside, but your relatives remind you that real Romans don't run away from public opinion. So you stay, every morning greeting your potato-faced twin with grim acceptance. And yet, there's a kind of freedom in it. Once your statue's nose becomes the city's favorite joke, people stop expecting perfection. The pressure to impress softens, just a little. Children rub your statue's nose for luck. Poets work it into their verses. Local cheese merchants offer nose specials in your honor. You become part of the city's lore, not the legend you'd hoped for, but at least you're unforgettable. In the end, you realize that in Rome, reputation is as much about surviving ridicule as it is about earning respect. The statue will outlive you, the jokes will multiply, and somewhere down the line, some future noble will stand in your place and hope the sculptor is kinder to his nose. For now, you smile at your reflection, potato and all, and remind yourself that in ancient Rome, public image is fleeting, but a good sense of humour lasts forever. And so, as another absurdly complicated Roman day draws to a close, you finally slip into your too soft, too expensive bed, one eye open for lurking relatives, the other half watching for leaky pipes, poisoners, and the house monkey eating your will. You've survived the endless parade of clients, the dinner parties that last longer than some small wars, and enough toga-related mishaps to make you swear off linen forever. Tonight, as you drift off, let's take a quiet moment to appreciate just how gloriously ridiculous and wildly stressful it was to be rich in ancient Rome. Because while the villas were grand and the feasts could bankrupt a province, every privilege came bundled with paranoia, judgmental neighbors, and the constant existential dread that someone, somewhere, wanted your statue knocked over and your fortune redistributed. But here's the thing. The Romans survived it all. Scheming families, invasive pets, dubious medical care, and social drama that would put any modern reality show to shame. For every banquet ruined by a drunken senator, or every night spent worrying about whether your bath was laced with something extra, there was also laughter, resilience, and a stubborn, hopeful desire to live another day, preferably in a nicer toga. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, under a roof that probably won't collapse, with plumbing that only betrays you occasionally, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the past. Thank you, Romans, for enduring absurdity so we could have toothpaste, central heating, and family members who, at the very least, have to text before showing up. History is gross, terrifying, and hilarious. But it's also proof that humans, whether draped in togas or sweatpants, are stubborn, hopeful, and just trying to survive the next dinner party. Sleep well. Dream of marble columns and slightly less competitive cousins, and I'll see you in the next impossibly weird chapter of history. Good night.